Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Hope you're all doing fantastic today and weathering the daily challenges that we've been facing. Today I'm going to talk about strategic planning, which is part of my Leading Change series of broadcasts. And it's really a critical tool. It's a really powerful tool that you as a leader can use to catalyze change within your organization and to really make advancements by leaps and bounds. Consider your strategic plan like a blueprint for a success, a long-term success. The typical strategic plan is about 3 to 5 years, although some of them will go for maybe a 10-year plan, or even bolder ones will even be a 20-year plan. So they could be of different durations, but typically I would say, in my experience, it's going to be 2 or more years. And sometimes you might even be asking, like, well, what about in the age of COVID? Is it even is it even worthwhile when things are changing so fast? And I would argue that yes, depending how you go about creating your strategic plan, because there's more in the process of creating the strategic plan than just the end result of the plan itself or whatever actions you're doing. So I'm going to share a little bit about the process. And I've been fortunate to have facilitated the strategic planning process in a number of organizations, and as an internal consultant, if you will, and helping to develop organizations and teams, and as well as an external. So the first strategy or first consideration, and this kind of feeds into one of the pitfalls, is I've seen many leaders create strategic plans in a vacuum. And what ends up happening is, you create it maybe among the executive team, and then you roll it out, and then people forget about it, or they don't even know what it is, or where it's coming from, or what the rationale was, and there's just a disconnect. And so to avoid the disconnect, and then a lack of ownership of the plan. It's like, well, that's what they wanted. They didn't ask me what I wanted, or that doesn't align with what I want. So I recommend a powerful key strategy is to assemble a cross-functional team, and not just cross-functional at the same level, like a bunch of directors or VPs or C-level, but what's often referred to as a diagonal slice. So not only do you have all the individual silos, like your marketing, your IT, your HR, your operations, your customer service, your marketing, right? All the different functions, your engineering, that you have the functions across, but you also have different levels from the front line all the way up to the C-suite. So depending on the size of your organization, if your organization is small enough, or if you're doing it for your team, you could have everyone in the room. The strategic planning process, though, would be very unwieldy, wouldn't it? If you have hundreds and hundreds of people. Now, it doesn't mean you can't. Some organizations do use that, but that's going to lead into one of my other points in terms of how you structure the planning process. The idea is to try to find ways to get people involved in different parts of the process along the way. It's not necessarily a one and done type of event. So something to consider. The second strategy is to really think about upfront how you're going to communicate this plan and the progress being made to the employees, to your team, or to employees in the organization. One of the challenges that I've seen is that, as I referred to earlier, is around the lack of ownership or alignment. You have people running in these different directions, and you have these strategic priorities, but people aren't really owning it, and there's a disconnect between whatever goals that they set and what's been set at the higher level strategic plan. So think about how can you keep people, number one, aware of what the plan is, number two, help them understand the implications for their respective business units, for their area, for their team, for their job even. So something to really think about upfront is kind of that communication plan as well that goes with the strategic plan. A third component is your preparation, right? So invest the time in preparing up front to do it right. Right? Think about how's it best to structure this process based on the constraints that exist in your business, based on how many people that you're looking to involve, right? So it might be like a 3-day retreat type of format. Some organizations might have a 1-day strategic planning session. But generally, strategic planning, the process is an iterative process. You might have an initial something out there, but usually there needs to be a constant back and forth to refine it and sharpen the plans, goals, and objectives and actions that are needed to bring it about. So it's worth it to invest to do it right. Now the fourth aspect are, what are some of the key components of an effective strategic plan? And there's a lot of creative ones out there, but some of the more fundamentals are, starting with an external and internal trend analysis, right? And this is where you can really engage a lot of your employees from different perspectives, different parts of the organization, to help to do some of that research and help identify the trends before the meeting, right? This is before the meeting. I mean, you could have a kickoff and say, hey, troops, we're about to embark on this. You could have kind of like a little kickoff or pep rally type of thing, but really encourage you to have like cross-functional teams, look into different trends. What kind of trends? Well, there's government and regulatory trends, there's economic trends, there's socio-cultural trends, what's going on in the environment. There's all kinds, there's industry, like what's going on within your industry. There's what's going on in your geographic area. There's all kinds of trends, right, that you can look at externally. Technology, that's a big one. So what technologies are out there and what are the implications? What's coming down the pike? What are the potential implications? So that's the kind of the key step. And then internally, what are the trends in terms of turnover, in terms of employee relations issues, in terms of capital projects and delivery? Like, what are the patterns that are noticed? Hiring trends, skill sets, whatever it is. So there's a lot of things you can look at internally as well. The second piece of it is to do a SWOT analysis. You take all those trends and you identify what are the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, right? With respect to some of that research that has been done. Now, some people do it without researching trends and all that. They just jump right to it. When you do that, though, is you work from a much more narrower slice, right? And you can get that tunnel vision. One of the benefits of strategic planning is to allow you to think differently and beyond to the current thinking of the organization, right? So if you're going to position yourself for future success, you need to see what's going on out in the world versus just what you've always been doing. And so sometimes doing a SWOT analysis will incorporate some of that just by people's brainstorm, but being intentional and gathering the trends before the SWOT analysis is something that I've seen much more effective. A third aspect is the vision, mission, and values. What are the core values of the organization? Again, these are things that, whether you have COVID or not, they're going to stand the test of time for the most part. And, if you need to pivot, you can pivot, but generally the values will remain the same. The vision typically is a long enough term vision where it'll remain the same. It's just how you're going to get there may vary, right? And so those are things that you can adjust, but those are very galvanizing things to get your people aligned around, because when there's doubt, those are the things that individuals can fall back on, is those vision, mission, and values to help guide decisions that they make, particularly in a dynamic environment. You need to make some adjustments. A fourth aspect is the strategic priorities. And generally you would want to limit it to maybe 3 to 5 categories, 3 to 5 broad ones. If you can get it down to 3, all the better. If you have too many priorities, then you really don't have you really don't have any priorities. If you make everything kind of the high priority, so the priorities are tend to be kind of your very broad categories of things. So the fourth one, it would be action planning, right? So that's another major component. It's not enough just to have the direction. So pretend you have a map. You also want to have, well, how are you planning to get there, right? So if you're trying to go from the West Coast to the East Coast, the action plan is going to inform how you're going to get there. So again, you want to get action plan and you want to have it specific as possible. What are the steps you can identify? What are the target dates as well? Who's responsible for each of those? So you want to have some type of principal or owner, someone that's going to be driving it, someone that's going to be ultimately accountable for that. And you can do that at different levels. You can have it for the priority, someone's accountable for that. It could be one of your executives, 5 different executives. If you're a small organization or a team, then you need to scale it appropriately. The final component I'll mention is doing a little bit of scenario planning as well, kind of what if, right? Or some people call it contingency planning. So that will give the flexibility, like what if a natural disaster strikes? How might we adjust our plan here, or would it drastically change? Do we need to reconvene, or do we just make this little pivot? So by doing some of this thinking in advance, your plan will be quite robust. The last thing I'll mention, and this is the 5th overall strategy for strategic planning that I'm going to share tonight, and that is to ensure that whatever action plan or strategic plan you come up with, that you assign a budget, right? One of the worst things is to have all these great ideas and then end up with these unfunded mandates. I'll never forget, when I worked with this one nonprofit organization. They're excellent at strategic planning, but one of the flaws initially was that there wasn't a budget assigned to it, committed to it. And so we were always scrambling when it came time. Okay, well, this is, the goal is to get this launched in 6 months or whatever, and you need a budget. So then you're scrambling to find it. And so what ends up happening is it ends up coming out of certain departments, and it just doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason where the money is coming from. And it's like this magical thinking that the money is going to emerge from somewhere. And I've seen this tank so many strategic plans by not having that determined, up front, or at least once you complete the plan, to kind of go back and now, how are we going to fund it? How are we going to allocate it? So key thing. So just to recap, for having a robust strategic plan, recommend assembling a cross-functional team that's a diagonal slice of the organization, so you have great representation and can avoid disconnects. Think about how you're going to communicate the strategic plan and the message, so people understand it, so that people can see their part in it, what they're expected to do, and to be able to track progress. Invest in the preparation. How are you going to structure that strategic planning process? What makes most sense, right? To spread it out or have an intense burst, like a few days of everyone together, or just spacing it out? What makes sense? And then the meat of the plan, the different components of a good strategic plan. And then lastly, assigning a budget, so funding it, make sure you fund the plan. So those are my tips. It was probably more than 5 overall, and hopefully that was helpful. I will be on again next Tuesday, so tune in. We have 2 more installments for Leading Change. So next week will be improving processes and systems. Improving processes and systems. And the last one will be in 2 weeks, evaluating the impact of your change and celebrating success, right? We often forget that. So those are the 2 remaining, and that should wrap it up for the year before the holidays. So hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you next time.